Good afternoon and welcome. Good evening. Welcome to everybody as we look at this whole idea of a very, very interesting uh, area of India. But this series, which is Lock in Frame India, episode number 5, Rhythms of Rivers and the Ocean, Orissa. Lock in Frame India is a new kind of an initiative where we are looking at the emerging COVID world from the lens of the Indian cultural heritage. Normally, when we speak of Odisha, vis-a-vis travel and cultural engagements, there is a stereotyping of looking at Orissa, which is limited to the Golden Triangle, incorporating a visit either for leisure or for natural heritage or for pilgrim tourism. It is limited to the idea of some of the heritage parks, maybe the turtle phenomena, or it is limited to the temple circuit of Bhubaneswar, Puri, Konarak, the Golden Triangle. And tourists who go to Orissa will perhaps see the Odissi dance, pick up some of the artifacts made by the plethora of Oriya craftsmen. But today, we are going to travel to understand the multi-layering with regard to the idea of water and oceans. I welcome you all, and let's start on this amazing journey. So my first, before we start, let's all live the idea of the ocean by listening to how we are looking at and hearing the sound of the waves. So when we are looking at Orissa, the ethos of oceans, rivers, and water bodies is seminal to the idea of the mental mindscape of the Oriya imagination. It is a land on the eastern coast of the Indian subcontinent where indigenous or original cultures were married to the Brahminical and to the Buddhist high cultures. But even today, there is a coexistence between the original indigenous cultures and the higher cultures. The relationship of Odisha vis-a-vis water is about power, water bodies, water life, water economics, and water sociology. And of course, the role of gender and caste. What is culture? We often dismiss culture in terms of dance and music and crafts or festivals. And we also dismiss the idea of heritage and limit it to the idea of built heritage when we see a monument. But culture in its widest sense is the human responses to their geographical context. So here it is about Orissa. What are the two places where human societies build up their economics? Land and water. And Orissa has both. So its cultural phenomena and its frame is related to the idea of land and water. But more than that, when we are talking about geographical context, how can we forget that both the cultivation of harvest and prosperity and wealth is related to climate? And therefore, the phenomena of monsoons is extremely important in the manner in which rituals and festivities and responses of lifestyle are, even the way people dress, the way people celebrate, and the way people eat is tailored according to the climatic, especially the monsoon cycle. The idea of, unlike the run of Kutch, in Gujarat on the western coast. Odisha, though there is a simple dismissal that the seafaring knowledge has gone, because they had a vibrant indigenous community of merchants until around the 14th century. But post that, you had shipping, the shipping industry controlled by a variety of maritime European powers. However, the people there often say that the sadabas or the merchants going on long voyages for trading on the sea, that got curtailed around the 14th century. Frankly speaking, when we go to interact with the fishing communities or the people who build the boats, that is not so. The seafaring knowledge, the nautical skills, the navigation, the understanding of the ocean is very much a part of the lived understanding of the idea of rivers and ocean. So once we enter this, we have to say where we are going. And this is a very beautiful poem written by a very well known Oriya poet, Maya Dharman Singha, who writes, "Never did I dream that you had such treasures." So it is that idea that people believe that everything is lost, but it is living somewhere. And it comes out so poignantly in these lines of poem. Never did I dream that you had such treasures. And this is on the Mahanadi. The Mahanadi, they say. Mahanodi, they say. Never did I dream that you had such treasures of beauty in your store, Mother Orissa, till I sailed up your blue waters of the moonlit Mahanadi. Now, very interestingly, I'm not a person indigenous to Orissa, so please excuse me if my pronunciation and the linguistic sensitivity of pronunciation may go wrong. At the outset, I would like to clarify. Secondly, this is an exercise to invite common people to enter the world of cultural heritage without feeling the burden of academic rigor. And so as we proceed, keeping these two ideas in mind, I take the liberty of journey through Orissa on the coastal and recounting the coastal story. When we enter the coastal story, we need to understand, like the run of Kutch, where both the Muslims and the Hindu communities have, because this is an unknown, like when you go into the mountains, there are innumerable mountain spirits and mountain goddesses. Similarly, there are river goddesses, but there are also ocean gods and goddesses. And it's very fascinating to understand that the idea of the woman as the source of energy, the yin and the yang, as the Chinese say, that rests on the idea of the woman, both as a symbol of fertility, that is prosperity, harvest, and also the idea of protection. So, in this concept of protection and fertility and prosperity, you have the culture of Devi Mangala. And there are many rituals, there's a whole trajectory of temples and rituals associated with the ocean goddess. There are quite a few ocean goddesses, but Ma Mangala takes a very central position. So let us hear. Ma Mangala. Now, it is very interesting that the main temple of Ma Mangala is 50 kilometers from Bhubaneswar on the eastern coast, and this is called Kakatpur. And the small story that is related to Ma Mangala, one of it is that the idol was found by an individual, and then a crow went and got stuck in the marshes of the river. So the crow Kak Atka, and that is where her temple is. And she is perceived very intriguingly to be a form of the great mother goddess Durga. But she is also known as the goddess Vanadurga, the goddess of the forest. And it is also, and this is very interesting, that you, in these oral historical narratives, you have these cultures related to other Southeast Asian countries, or with Sri Lanka and other ocean countries. So one of the oral beliefs is that the original, that Ravan in one of the Ramayans, and we have over 40 Ramayans in India and other Ramayans in Japan, in Korea, etc. But in one of the versions, that it is believed that Ma Mangala was the deity of energy of Ma Durga, worshipped by Ravan. And she was then brought, after the defeat of Ravan, it is believed that she was brought from Sri Lanka to Orissa and consecrated in this district of Orissa. And such is her idea of traveling the ocean and the power of the ocean, which is embellished in her form, that the presiding deity of entire Orissa, Lord Jagannath, is also somehow linked with the idea of Goddess Mangala. Every 19 years, the three idols of Jagannath Puri temple, which is the central temple that is the eco center of Orissa, these idols are remade. And one kind of, there's a tree variety in India which has medicinal value. It is very, very sacred in that sense because of its multiple human use, and that is the Neem tree. And there are three Neem trees, and until Mangala comes into the dream of the Brahmin priest, those trees are identified. Only Mangala tells, Devi Mangala indicates which are the trees that incorporate the spirit of Lord Jagannath and his two other companions, his sister Subhadra and Balram. And it is those trees which are called Daru Brahma trees that link Lord Jagannath to the idea of remaking Lord Jagannath, and which is only after Mangala indicates that those trees are then approached. It is very interesting to see in Orissa that the idea of the goddesses of prosperity energies harvest over land and over sea is then duplicated through other rituals. So, for instance, there's a very great transformation on the idea of Bali Yatra. Now, Bali Yatra is really indigenously a fascinating ritual practiced and aligned to the agrarian culture of Orissa, which is harvesting over land. And for this, the central character in the ritual is the idea of bijam, of seeds, where women nurture the seeds. They, in as a ritual, they go to the river, they go to a water body, or they come and then they generate and take the little saplings. And it is believed that those seedlings nurtured by these women in the course of the Bali Yatra, if it grows and it comes out as these saplings which these women are carrying, then they will have a good harvest. If not, they won't have a good harvest. So the idea of seeds and energy and harvest and good crops, and the idea of the journey of this and the energy to the journey is provided by the women. That is the ritual of Bali Yatra. But what happens that when you reformulate the idea of Bali Yatra in the frame of contemporary tourism, then it is reinterpreted. The word Bali is associated with Indonesia and the journeys of the old merchants across the Indian Ocean. And it has become an annual fair, which is transformation of an agrarian, which is still practiced, by the way, the agrarian ritual to the idea of Bali Yatra as India's connection to the old oceanic world, which is the new way of exhibiting culture through this big mela or fair which happens, and where dancers, for instance, are commissioned to create dance dramas on this whole journey across the oceans. Special kind of plays are created, and people recreate this particular form of an agrarian ritual into a touristy, or both inviting indigenous as well as international tourism to grow in Orissa. Another very important part related to the idea of harvest and the monsoons are two major Hindu uh, months. One is Chaitra, or the harvest of the spring, and then there's the harvest during autumn, which is Kartik. And in both these months of the Hindu festivals are organized, rituals, elaborate rituals happen all over India, and so it is also with Orissa. And as the harvest approaches, people cleanse themselves, get ready to create new energies of new rejuvenation and protection. So we enter the next idea, and this is what I was referring to, the Neem Tree and the making of Lord Jagannath with the blessings of Goddess Mangala. So in the idea of Orissa, there are, geographically and factually speaking, 11 rivers as of today. But there's a saying in Oriya language that to go to the oceanic world, you need to cross 13 rivers and 7 seas. Now, the idea of 7 seas, very, very intriguingly, comes across all across the world. You have the Mediterranean world, you have the Native American world, you have the Greek world, you have the Egyptian world, you have the Chinese world, and they all refer to the idea of the 7 seas, even the Arabic world. Now, in the Indian ethos, one of the interpretations of the idea of 7 seas is an internal journey of 7 worlds above and 7 worlds below. And the number astrologically of 13 is related to the idea of the lunar cycle. And as we know, that the idea of lunar is linked with not only the women's energy because of the menstruation cycle and the idea of fertility, but also with that of the tide movement and the water movement. So in the month of Kartik, which is October, November, which is when the harvest is going to come, two things happen: that the winds are favorable for the boats to sail to the outer world. And in that context, people get ready for preparing for the harvest. The women also take a central place here, and they draw these geometrical designs. And this is a Kartik mandala in terms of the geometrical designs to empower and generate an ecosystem energy. So we come to the geographical context. So the journeys in the, so we have to understand that there are two kind of mappings that we are engaged with. So one is the cultural mapping of our mental mindset. Sorry. One is the cultural mapping of our mental mindset. Just sorry, I'm sorry for this. Yeah, one is the cultural mapping of the mindset, where we see in the midst of the Ramayana and other tales like the Mangala tale, this whole idea of traveling along the eastern coast, which now politically means that Orissa is aligned to Telangana, to Andhra Pradesh, and to Tamil Nadu, and then moving on to Sri Lanka. So that is the whole Coromandel coast. And so the cultural geography is related to this context of seafaring and communication and movement of people and boats, etc. Then there is the other wider context of the journeys into the oceanic world, both on the western side as well as more to the recounting of collective memories and connections that are drawn with people coming in and out. Now, this is also recollected, the conversations of collective memory comes out also in linguistics. For instance, there's a stereotyping when you move east into in the southeastern world of the Indian Ocean. The word you often get is cling, which is the old word of Orissa, which is Kalinga. And many people say this is all about people coming from Kalinga, which is Orissa. But actually, it has become a stereotype related to anybody coming from the Indian subcontinent. The other recall value that when you see in Odisha itself, so we need to also understand that while we are looking into the outer world and seeing the connections between Odisha and the outer world, but first we need to understand what do we have and what is our maritime culture and a culture of the water. So, for instance, we have the Lanka Mircha. So, Lanka, the Sri Lankan chili, or the cashew nut called the Lanka Amba. So these are automatically collective memories through linguistics. And that is what I find fascinating, that without language, you will not be able to draw these connections which are so important. Here again, as we look into these mappings, you come to the Strait of Malacca, which is very, very integral to the way people collect. So Malacca becomes a congregational for very many mercantile communities from India and other parts of Asia and Africa who gather there and they trade. And there are several records that talk about interchange. And when you are talking about interchange, it's not limited to just giving products, it's also exchange of ideas, people intermix, they exchange, they communicate through language, ideas, symbols, etc. So Malacca then becomes a very important way to understand how we are looking at this whole understanding of the synergy of the coastal India with that of South Asia, Southeast Asia. So let us look, like normally, as I said, when we travel to Orissa, we are looking at landing in Bhubaneswar and doing the Golden Triangle and sometimes going to see these natural parks. But today we are going to travel and we are going to go right up to Bhadrak in the north and to Kendrapara and to Jagat Singhpur, where there is a very, very important harbor which has been contemporized as Paradeep. And then we go to Katak, which is Mahanadi and the link with Paradeep. And beyond that, we also go to Bhitarkanika, one of the examples of a natural heritage tour. So echoes from pre-Roman times. There are two examples I take of this, that when we travel to Orissa, you often, and you see the dancers of Odissi dances, many decorations and ways of utility, whether they're earrings or jewelry. You see this famous lacy metal work called the filigree work, both in gold and more in silver. And so the filigree work in itself is a testimony of Orissa's link with other nations. As far as back as 5000 BC, years ago, and you have links of the filigree in Mesopotamia and Greece and so on and so forth, and in other parts of India like Andhra Pradesh. So the filigree work is a testimony where you get this idea of linking both in terms of technique and the decorative and the utilitarian use of these objects. Their designs, the methodology of doing this, they are the threads where we recall. And it's fascinating that a lot of this wisdom of actually creating this work is traditional oral history and traditional oral cultures. So this is very important. The other is this rollated ware, where you get these toothpick designs, as you can see. And this is very specific to the Indian subcontinent, not only Orissa, but in other locations in India where you had the where pottery found. In Orissa, it is in this piece is from Shishupalgarh. Again, there's a connectivity. Where and wall did Indian traders and Indian exchanges happen? And this is found both in Southeast East Asia and as well as in the Western countries. So again, making of these threads, and where do we start in collecting the threads and building all kinds of associations, including tourism travel, including knowledge networks of skill building. that can happen when we are looking at these connections, and not just limited to historical studies in university or archaeological studies, but the participation of common people in this whole recovery of these memories. So, central to the whole idea of maritime is the symbol of the boat. The boat, the now, who makes them, how they are made, what are the rituals, what are the symbolisms, what are the techniques, what are the varieties. And in this world of the boat, we enter that world through this magnificent master man, Mr. Sudarshan Sahu, who's a national awardee and a sculptor. No books written, a lot of collective memory which is passed on from one generation to the other. And what does he say? For creating a boat, I said, sir, when you create a boat, what do you talk about? And he so poetically answered my question. I recall the myth of the churning of the ocean, in the Indian myth of churning of the ocean. So when the myth is talking about churning of the ocean, first comes out the poison, then comes out all kinds of things, and then comes out the exiliar of everlasting life and happiness. And in that churning, he said, oh, we're talking about churning during COVID time. So immediately he narrated the existence of today. And in this, he said, I look at my stone, and what do I see? I see the five elements of fire, space, water, air, and the earth. I hear the sound of the waves. When it's a large wave, I make a large boat to go and sail on the ocean. When it's a small wave, I am reminded of Krishna sailing with the milkmaids on the Gandharva Boita, on the boat. Boita is boat in Orissa, on the boat of pleasure. And therefore, because it's pleasure, I embellish it. Look at the way he carved this boat. He has so much of activity of parasols and musical instruments, intricately designed boat. And then I see the myth of the churned ocean come alive. And I see the large visions of the boat sailing into the Indian Ocean. This is the way we enter the world of boats. So there are so many evidence from ancient times in Orissa of different kinds of boat making and methodologies. And within this context, you see palm leaf manuscripts of methods of making boats, as much as you see the narratives of living heritage. So the boat builders is a very interesting community. When the carpenter goes to buy the boat wood, there are many kind of boat wood which is selected. And there are hierarchies. So, for instance, the traders who go on the sea and bring back other elements of pearls and so on, and textiles and gold and silver and what have you, and the spices. The other two very important elements for usage is ginger and normal spices that you get. But there's a hierarchy of the traders, and that goes into a Odia saying. And the saying says, how will the ginger merchant know the value of a horse or a ship? Because horses are brought from Persia and Arabia. How will you know the value? How will a ginger merchant know the value of horses and a ship? So there is a hierarchy, because the ginger and the spices are sold by the common vendor on the road. So there's a hierarchy there. And here you're looking at the idea of boat building. And he says that, in that we pick a very special kind of wood, which is locally called the wood of Arjun tree, which is in biological, botanical, scientific term is Terninia. They have the oral knowledge of measuring the sap and the moisture in the wood. And they even have ways to calculate the weight of the wood and the what should I say, the value of the wood by depending on the volume, which is calculated. In fact, I was talking to a person who said we calculate the volume of the wood on the basis of the circumference of the midsection. Look at the detailing. Calculated on the basis of the circumference of the midsection of the log, which is then multiplied by its length. Can you imagine? So that is how they make the boats. But then once you make the boat, then every part of the boat is venerated. But the most important part of the boat to be venerated is the keel, which you see in the above. Now, what is the keel? The keel is the flat blade sticking down into the water from a sailboat bottom. It has the two function of balancing the boat so that it doesn't sail away, and it keeps the boat in an upright position. The keel is called the danda, and while it is being based, because the whole boat will sail on the balance created, it's like the tail of the fish. There's actually a puja or a ritual to consecrate it, to give it life, and it's called Jan Dan. So a priest is called, an astrologer is called for, and the boat is worshipped not only the time that it makes its first sail across the ocean or the river, and there are different river boats and sea boats, but the time when every part is being made. There are special ways to consecrate it and give it life, such as the detailing of the boat making knowledge. The living expressions of the way people may be saying that the old merchants, the the Sadhavas, stopped sailing and seafaring, stopped in the 14th century, but the rituals continue. And one of the maritime festival, which is very central both to the Mangala story and the Mangala Devi, and it is intertwined with a local epic which is related to the merchant's daughter called uh, Tapoi, which is recalled. And here it says, wait, what is the Tapoi story? So the Tapoi story, which is a part of the narrative, of this festival. So what happens in this festival? Girls in the monsoon months of Bhadra. So we have 4 monsoon months. In the month of Bhadra, that when cyclones come, at that point of time, what do we have? This is the time when fishes return from the south, where the directions of waters change and fishes come into the south. They multiply, they breed, and and after the monsoons are over, again the winds change, and while the ships are set to sail, the fish also swim back into set to go south. So, in this time of both cyclones and breeding of the fish, again the women's energies are required both for aspired prosperity and for protection. So, the Tapoi myth and the epic goes like this: that there was a young girl who had 7 brothers, and the 7 brothers were seafaring traders. And it so happened that she asked for a golden winnowing, to sift the rice grains. And the brothers gave their sister the golden winnowing. After which she wanted the golden moon, and they started making the golden moon. But when they did start make, it so happened, misfortune happened, and the father died. And they had a lot of economic problems, and the merchants had no choice but to go to the sea. And before leaving, they told their wives, "This is our favorite sister, and do take care of her." But there was a Brahmin neighbor who was very jealous of Tapui, and she fills the years of the sister in law against Tapui, so much so that all the sister in laws start ill treating the young sister. When the merchants return, they hear a sound of sobbing. They go and find Tapoi weeping, and Tapoi says, "All my sister-in-laws, but the younger one, ill-treated me, and I'm starving. I've been given kudra, that is broken rice, to eat." And so the brothers say, "Okay, now you assume the form of, you dress up like Devi Mangala, sit on the ship, and when all these women come to worship, receive their husbands, and they see Tapoi sitting, and in one of the myths it is that she cuts off the noses of all her sister-in-laws, and she gives a pearl necklace. Now the pearl is very important. I understood that the pearl mukta is a very treasured way of looking at trade, because also of, you know, that in Iraq the Basra pearls and so on and so forth. Again, pearl is something which is related to the moon and to the water. So the pearl takes a very significant symbolism, which most people, I asked a lot of people, and they said, no, no, no. But then when I did deeper studies and I looked at these cross links, it was rather fascinating. So in the Kudru Koni festival, the girls, they fast on all the Sundays of the month of Bhadra, in the monsoon month of Bhadra. They go to the river bank or to the ocean, and they build the temple in honor of Devi Mangala, and they hoist a little flag on top of it, and they fast, and then they have a ritual bath, and they have special food which is cooked here, and this is not for the husbands but for the protection of the brothers. So this is Kudrukoni, which happens on the onset of the monsoon, soon after the onset of the monsoon. Also protection because it's the cyclone time. Now, it's interesting to see that unlike Kutch, which of course, as I told you, has a vibrant, on the western coast of India, which has a very, very vibrant seafaring culture, living culture, not only of making boats, but of people going into the sea. They've, in the training of seafaring in the Run of Kutch, they also have a system where they understand and they are told that there are 10 kind of storms and how to deal with these 10 kind of storms. I have yet to come across that kind of knowledge. I'm sure it is there, still living in the minds of the fishing community, but I wasn't able to detect this particular idea because every year there are storms and sea cyclones, etc., in Orissa. And you find that the expression of the Tapoi myth and the brothers and sealing out and the Kudrakoni, Mangla Devi and the Tapoi, they're celebrated in different forms. When we come to this idea of the living heritage, again, it's the idea of geography, geopiety. So I told you in the monsoons that one festival takes place, and when the Kartik month comes, then there is yet the beginning when the ships are going to go back into the sea, and they will return around January. So at this point of time, to see off the ships and to welcome them back, they have the famous maritime ritual called Boita Vandana, where women again fast, they have ritual baths, and they sail the boats, paper boats, banana leaf boats, and so on and so forth. And they sing a song that I am, and they put a ritual lamp and other betel nuts, supari, and they push the boats. Apparently, these boats were also sailing. Similar rituals you can find in Thailand as well. And there's a saying that when winter recedes, the boats sail, an Odia saying. As I said, there are many, many kinds of mercantile communities, the Sadhavas and the Jains, and there are many evidences, both archaeologically as well as manuscripts wise, records that say talk about different communities. And the Sadhavas, it is believed that they didn't disappear, but they just repositioned themselves as money lenders and local traders, Sahukars. a very center of the maritime culture, we cannot but talk about the fishing communities, the Kebartas. It is very interesting to see that anthropologically, biologically speaking, the Kebartas are most indigenous to the coastal cultures of the subcontinent. But as Brahmanism became wider and wider, and the prevalence of the greater religions like Buddhism as well, which are backed by a whole economy, it is fascinating to see how the Kaibartas, which are the marginalized caste, get incorporated in the wider frames of Brahmanism and Buddhism. So when we talk of Brahmanism, the Kaibarta or the fishing communities are linked to both the two epics of the Ramayana as much as to the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, the main protagonist, where the Mahabharata tale starts, is a fishing princess called Satyavati. And the king marries, and she lays down a rule that it is her children who will be the heir to the throne of the Patliputra, and so of the Pandavas and the Kauravas kingdom. And so if this fishing woman is supposed to be from the Kebarta caste. But there is another oral history to say that King Ashoka of 3rd century BC was again in love with the Kebarta princess, and for him, he fought for Kalinga. So it's fascinating how this gets narrated. But in the Ramayana too, which is the most prevalent epic that crosses the ocean, it's interesting to note that the Kebarta plays an important role as the Nishad or the boatman who makes Lord Ram cross the river. And so the boatman as a symbol becomes the idea of crossing the river, the idea of transcending one existence to the other. So the Kebata takes a very central role in the entire idea of human organizations within India and outside as well. Apart from the boat, the idea of the heritage of fishing nets, depending on the seasons, the shape of the sizes of the fish change depending on where you're fishing, whether in the river or in the ocean, the kind of material that is used, the kind of size of the nets that are used differs, and that's again a whole heritage that you come across. So the fishing community, they have their own rituals, etc. And what is fascinating is that we come to one of the main idols, of course, uh, which is there, which is the horse-headed deity. But along the coast, we have in the village of Satabhaya village, you have this particular temple of Ma Panch Varahi temple, which was actually sinking due to climate change. This temple is managed by the fishermen community, and it is the women who are the priestess, and the men are not allowed to enter because they are perceived as pollutants. So what interested me was that these Dalits, I mean, they're the most marginalized community, and it is the women who are the actually holding the ritual power here. And when this temple was sinking, it was for the first time men were commissioned to lift the idols and to recreate the temple and relocate the temple. And then had to be purified, and all the rituals happened. And this idol, interestingly, has in the right hand a fish, and in the other side is a man looking towards the sea. So very fascinating. So Orissa is actually much more than going to Puri and Konark. You have this fascinating way of looking into Orissa. Now, in the Kebarta myth, they have their own seminal religious book. It's called the Kebarta Gita, which was written in the 15th century. And here there is a myth we'll talk about, but their main deity, the community goddess, is the goddess with the horse head. And we will talk about that. But that whole imaging of the horse head Devi, very interestingly, has a relationship or looks like the INR terracotta horses on the left of Tamil Nadu, which are protective deities made outside and located outside villages in Tamil Nadu. So, this whole link of Orissa culturally, both in terms of linguistics as well as rituals, with Telangana and Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu reoccurs constantly when we are looking at the coastal cultures. In the this particular goddess is called Baseli, and annually in the month of spring, when all the boatmen return and they are comparatively free and the harvest on land is going to happen, they have the Basili Chaitra Puja, which goes on for a whole month, from one full moon to the other, where horses of representing the Devi is recreated. They offer food, and every day there are dances and there are rituals. For 8 days, the horses are kept, the horses representing the goddess are kept inside the temple and then are brought out, and ritually dances are performed, usually with two male dancers, one white, one black, as a male female concept of the Devi, which comes into as an energizing force. Now, it is interesting to see that the goddess, the horse headed goddess, why the horse when it is actually a community related to the harvest of the sea? So there's another myth which is in the Kevarta Gita, that Krishna, when he was a little baby, was sucking his foot thumb and floating on a banyan leaf when he created a man in the ocean, and he went off to sleep. And the man was eaten up by a water demon. And then Krishna knew, and he came out in his beautiful form of Vishnu, killed the demon, and told this man that you will be called Kebarta, living near the water, and you will be the father god of your community. You will travel by horse on the land, and you will travel for trade by the boat. That is how the Kebarta, or the fishing community, are agriculturalists, both for the sea and for the land. This is how the goddess and the horse comes narrate sociologically intertwined with the existence of the fishing community. And we so this is how the Chaiti Ghoda dance takes place. Um, we come to another animal and another culture. Just one. I'm not taking the turtle for this lecture because it's already very dense. I'm taking the idea of Makara, or the crocodile, the idea of imagination and loss. In this journey of curating this program, there were many, many people I spoke to, many documents that I went through. One of the thing is the natural heritage tourism of Orissa, and Bhitarkanika is where the famous, huge, 20 feet huge crocodiles live. Let us see enlarged pixels, a small excerpt of mangrove journeys on the Bhitarkanika, and before we go into the symbol of the crocodile as a maritime culture of Orissa. The crocodile is very central to the imagination. This particular Bhitarkanika was a small provincial feudal lord's territory. The reserve itself has many rivers, and the mangroves are created. For instance, there's the Baitrani River, which is a very seminal river of this forest reserve. The Bait Rani has again mythical association. Bait Rani is supposed to be the river leading to the house of the death, the god Yama from the south side. It features also in the Buddhist thought Bait Rani as one of the rivers leading into the hell. In this whole synergy, the crocodile, which is again and again recurring in metaphors of creative expressions in Orissa, not only the part that it is a living heritage of natural heritage, but the crocodile, let's look at the symbolism. Again, the original communities who were there, they have been replaced by different migratory communities. Now there are largely Bangladeshi refugees who have been settling here, and unfortunately, though the natural heritage tourism has come up, it's important that we recover the rupture which has happened, which is related, and more studies need to be done to recover the cultures of the indigenous communities, because they're so important to create context and the richness of traditional wisdom and traditional thought. the, I was able to recover some of these, the knowledge. For instance, for some of the indigenous communities of these forests, the crocodile represents a creature of both water and land. It is representing the different state of the mind, the consciousness and the unconsciousness, the emotional balanced with rational. It is about precision and mobility, the way it moves to kind of capture its victim of prey, its stillness and yet its movement. And then you get crocodiles that emerge as the idea of fertility, the idea of, because it's surrounded by water, it's surrounded by greenery, it's surrounded by water life and ecosystems. So you get these ideas of Makara Kundala, earrings of the crocodile, not only in Odisha, but in different parts of Thailand, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Malaysia, etc. But then you see them also in the architectural idea of the gateways. Why the gateways? Because the gateways in the Hindu temple or a Buddhist temple or a Jain temple is about crossing the profane space into the sacred space. You bathe, you use the water to refine yourself, and the makar is used, as you can see in the arch. It is used to create life. So as you're going from the unconsciousness into the consciousness of a travel into a temple, the makar, torana, or the gateway becomes very important of how you travel the journey of your elevation of consciousness. Also, there's a myth which is fascinating, and I need to tell you the story. So, in the Mahabharata, again, the Indian epic, which which is recounted along the Indian Ocean countries, like the Ramayana also, you have this tale of this hero, the Pandava called Arjuna, and with his brother, he's exiled, and he goes then to different tirthas or pilgrimages. In the course of the tirtha, he wants to go and have bath bathe in different rivers which are holy or water bodies. Every time he goes there, he's warned by the local communities that these water bodies have crocodiles. So then he just doesn't bother, and he goes in for a bath, and he's attacked, and he fights with the crocodile, and the crocodile is wounded, and as it is lying unconscious, it sort of shrivels, and then out of it emerges a beautiful apsara, or a celestial maiden. And she says that all the crocodiles that you see in these pilgrimage water bodies are actually cursed maidens, celestial maidens, and so they are relieved. So the idea of dhanam, of giving donations or to different kinds of people, emerges from this pilgrimage of Arjuna. So how the crocodile is this transition from the conscious into the unconscious through the story of the Arjuna. Creative expressions and maritime cultures, how can we forget the idea of shadow puppetry? We see them all over. We see them in Thailand and Indonesia and so on and so forth. So in this journey, I was able to locate Gauranga Charan Dash, who is both a scholar and a professional puppeteer, who then shared with me the symbol that in the Ramayana you have an episode where Lord Ram is pursuing the golden deer. In India, we have the golden deer, which has one head, and you usually have the deer like this. But when you have the antelope, you actually create it like this. But in this, you actually have two deer heads, and the deer head helps you to change the direction. Now, to recreate, he said we could have a skill building workshop of great knowledge exchange with the people who do the creative expressions of shadow puppetry by looking at these musical tonal variations of manipulating these puppets. So, technique and sound variations. So, for instance, he said in Indonesia and Thailand, the double-headed deer, they produce the idea of jumping and movement and pursuit of Ram by using the mouth and the tambourine. In India, also, we use more the mouth for understanding the movement or replicating the movement of the deer. Let's have a look. So we continue this, and now we come to the world of Buddhism and the ocean idea of the Buddhist civilization. And when you go into the sites in Orissa of Lalitgiri, Udaygiri, and Ratnagiri, you feel as if you're not in India, you're in Cambodia, you're in Vietnam, you're in Thailand because of the similarities in which the Buddha face is created and Buddhist iconography is expressed. It's not like going to Sarnath or Nalanda or Gaya. It's like going into another world altogether, world of the ocean, Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia. And this is, we have had loads and loads of studies on architectural and iconographic studies of similarities and impulses of representation of the Buddha. But one of the features which needs to be explored again and again to create these cross linkages of Orissa as the anchoring place and the rest of the ocean world, of the Indian Ocean world, is the skill of the world which you travel and you discover the ideas of hydraulic engineering and rainwater harvesting. So when you go to Ratnagiri, you see these fascinating ways of rainwater harvesting, where an entire community of monks and maybe trading communities, and the trading communities, because in the reference of Buddha's own story, there are two merchants who meet Buddha in Sachi, in another place. So there is a connection of the historical Buddha with the merchants of Orissa that comes about, that also plays a role in Myanmar, it plays a role in Sri Lanka, etc., etc. So this whole thing about traders, Buddhism, and the idea of hydraulic engineering is something where when you travel in Orissa, you should watch out for and relish. Because this is something, because when you go to Turkey, for instance, you see an entire palace created of water, underwater facilities. When you go to Kashmir, you see the beautiful hydraulic engineering and what the Mughals did. When you go to Rajasthan, you see the step wells and so on and so forth. Here too, there is a remarkable heritage of hydraulic engineering. From this, we come to the idea of marine cultures and European interaction and even Arab interaction. So very recently in 2008, farmers in the district of Puri discovered in Kanas a lot of what is known as hero stones. Now, what are hero stones? On the left-hand side is a hero stone. and which indicates that there was a battle, some kind of battle. Now, scholars are studying to understand what were these conflicts about. There are a huge number of the second kind of idiom that gets revealed, and these are the stone anchors. Stone anchors represent nautical or seafaring skills, depending on the size of the boat, etc. That you have one hole or two holes or three holes. Now, the one hole stone anchors, for instance, were very common in the Arab world, especially when and you find them in Orissa, in Balasore, which is also indicative of the fact that the horse trade, the actual animal, not horse trading otherwise, but the animal horse trade was happening. And there is a Muslim influence of trade and economics happening on the eastern coast, not limited to the western coast. And you have these pillared lighthouses also now found in Kanas. The European, though the Sadapa trade in the Southeast Asia seems to have stopped around the 14th century, but you get this amazing heritage of the naval and the maritime cultures of European communities, the Dutch and the English, for instance. So in Balasore, you have these tombstones of the Dutch cemeteries, and on the left-hand side, in Bhadrak, you have the Hukitola, which is an amazing granary because the rice trade continued and shipping continued from the eastern coast, the Bay of Bengal, into Myanmar. There are many hundreds and thousands of people from the eastern coast still living and draw their lineages from Myanmar into the eastern coast, not merely with Odisha, but with the entire Coromandel coast from Bengal, from Orissa, etc. Now, this Hukitola is actually a greenery where the British stored rice for the drought, etc. But what is amazing is that under this building, there is a huge tank and rainwater harvesting, which the merchants used the entire year for drinking water. It's sweet water. Don't we miss out a lot when we travel in Odisha, just limiting our travel to just temples and Konark and Puri and Bhubaneswar and maybe one or two of the natural heritage? My God, the whole world opens if you just look at the context of coastal maritime cultures. I would like to end this session by thanking some of my resource people who have helped me to travel in the beginning of my journey, which I hope to continue. Ambassador Lalit Mansingh, Anthropology Professor Krishna Basa, Professor Nivedita Mohanty, Ambassador Abasar Beluria, Professor Umakant Mishra, Professor Lalatendu Das Mohpatra, Professor Patit Pawan Mishra, Mr. Vishal Dev, Mr. Nayak from the Secretary Tourism, Mr. Nayak, the Director Culture, Prasanna Dash, sculptor Sudarshan Sahu, and of course my dear friend, puppeteer and scholar Gauranga Charandash. Before I end, I would like to end with this note. Yes, India has a lot, not only in terms of tourism, but recollecting the collective memory of the past to build future contacts with the Southeast Asia. Knowledge networks and many more journeys, maritime journeys. Enjoy Orissa in this new manner. Let's hear this beautiful, peaceful sound of the Buddha before we say and bid goodbye. Sometimes technology just takes you for a ride. So this was basically Buddha's thing. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. Thank you. Thank you so